Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. As we get ready for Episode 2, it seems like it was just a week ago that we started everything. We're glad that you were with us, and away we go. You know, America loves big things, super things. Nothing epitomizes that more than the Super Bowl. It is Super Bowl week, and that's the theme of our show today. What? Horses and Super Bowl? Stay with us on this. The Super Bowl is the one sport that transcends sports. It is a social event. It's an event where you gather your friends together, and you may not even care who wins the game, but you want to watch the Super Bowl, or at least the Super Bowl commercials. It will be the most watched sport event of the year, and actually one of the most watched events of the year. Certainly a lot more than the Oscars. The rate they're going, though, this show will be watched more than the Oscars by this time next year. There are certain sports that need no explanation, of course. When you say the Super Bowl, you know it's a football game. Of course, it's much more than that. Let's see, you can say the Olympics. You may have to be specific about the Olympic event, but we know it's a World Games. We know what the World Series is, the Masters. We know what Wimbledon is, the Daytona 500, the Indianapolis 500. And in horse racing, all due respect to all those other big races out there, but there's only one that all of America knows, and that is the Kentucky Derby. It is the equestrian Super Bowl that happens the first Saturday of May in Louisville. And there's similarities between the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby. I mentioned the social event of the Super Bowl, the same with the Derby. Let's see, there's about 2 weeks to the Super Bowl leading up to it. All kinds of parties going on, corporate parties going on especially, and they will devote something like 200 hours leading up to a 3-hour football game. The Kentucky Derby, at least a week. In the city of Louisville, about 3 weeks, but at least a week of social gatherings. Again, corporations getting together and wining and dining their clients. And, something like 40 or 50 hours of TV coverage leading up to a 2-minute race. And people like to get together for parties this time of year, for Super Bowls, later for the Kentucky Derby. I don't know if there's two sporting events that bring people together more. Let's have some food and drink. Who do you think's going to win? Let's have a pool. I like this horse. I'm going to pick it out of the hat, or I'm going to just select the name. I like this team. I think in the first quarter they're going to score this many points. That's what brings it together and bonds people with the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby. Now, something else about both. There's a lot of history about both these sports, more so, of course, for the Derby. It's been around over a century, but you can look up a lot of stats and a lot of facts, and you probably heard one that if Tom Brady and the Patriots win, that he will be at 40 years of age, the oldest winning Super Bowl quarterback. That is one of the stats of the week.
Do you know who the oldest Derby winning jockey is?
Thomas Kenny, our researcher. Who would that be?
That would be Bill Shoemaker at the age of 54.
Wow, in 1986 aboard Ferdinand. Yes, the Shoe wins his final Derby and is the oldest. And may be, although Mike Smith may challenge him for that, possibility of that. You know, something else about the Derby and the Super Bowl, everybody likes those long shots. They don't have a chance to win this race. They won the race. He cannot win this game. Oh, look, he led them to victory. They won this game. Upsets. People like those too.
Yeah, the biggest long shot the Kentucky Derby's ever seen would be Donerail in 1913 at 91-1 odds.
Wow. You know, I left the track early that day. I was going to stay around and bet on Donerail. I was going to put $10 on him, and I thought, he doesn't have a shot at 91-1. No, but actually I was there in 2009 when Mind That Bird came in at 50-1. It was a rainy day. It was muddy. It was a sloppy track. And I was standing right by the rail, right at track level. Dr. Larry Bramlage, the esteemed veterinarian, was about 2 feet away from me. And as they're coming down the stretch, and people think, because, we've got these earpieces in, that we're hearing every single race call and all that. But when you've got 160,000 people cheering, there's a roar all around you. And oftentimes you cannot hear what's actually right in your ear. You're doing like this. So the horse is coming on the rail. There's about 3 horses between me and Mind That Bird. And I'm watching them on the rail, and they go by, and I looked at Larry, and he looked at me, and I said, did that New Mexico horse win it? As we called him. That's where he'd come from. He said, yeah, I think the New Mexico horse won it. And then we see Calvin Burrell riding out and say, yeah, it was. That's the 50-1 shot. Why didn't we bet him? You know why? Because he wouldn't have been 50-1 if all of us said we're going to bet him. That's it. Super Bowls. What about upsets, Thomas, in Super Bowls?
Well, the biggest one in my lifetime would have to be the New York Giants over the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 42.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good pick because the Patriots were unbeaten. They were 12-point favorites. They were going to duplicate the Dolphins' 72 season and be the perfect team. And then they lost on what is now one of the all-time great plays in football history. I don't care how many Super Bowls they have, there'll be probably no pass more memorable than this one, Eli Manning, when he made that great pass to David Tyree when it looked like he was being sacked, and Tyree catches it and pins it against his helmet.
Let's try that one. Let's do that pass. You got a football there.
Well, Ben Chaffins, thank you for bringing that up. Wow, what a coincidence. Hi, April. April's back with Jennifer Hall joins us today. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
Who, from New Mexico,
Yeah.
who bet on Mind That Bird, by the way.
Yeah.
So you're one of like 2 people I've ever met that bet on Mind That Bird. All right, you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Manning gets away from the sack. Again, away from the sack. He's looking. Tyree throws it over the head. Tyree pins it against his helmet. What a catch. Wow, reenactment. Did you all feel like you were there?
Absolutely.
Yes,
What a catch.
Look at this. Our couch has
just
doubled. The audience, the live audience here has doubled, if nothing else. Great catch. You know, something else about the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby, or actually football and horse racing as well. The vernacular carries over into business and just everyday life. We talk about, let's go for a touchdown. Let's make it to the end zone. Come on, cross the finish line. Let's go to the winner's circle. Let's see. The blitz. You know, we got to go out there and blitz the competition.
Jockey for position.
Jockey for position's another one.
Down the home stretch.
Down the home stretch. See? We say this all the time. People say that probably whatever you do, your boss or your coworker has said something like that to you, and you can say, oh, football fan or horse racing fan. Did you know that's where it came from? Well, this is our Super Bowl edition, and we've got a super show today. Glad you're with us. When we come back, we'll talk to the 2-time winning Super Bowl coach of the New York Giants, Bill Parcells, who also happens to be a horse racing owner and a longtime horse racing fan. And then later on, Fred Gaudelli from NBC Sports joins us. He is the executive producer of Sunday Night Football. He has produced Super Bowls and Kentucky Derbies and Triple Crown events. So who better to talk about what it takes to televise horse racing and football on their biggest day than Fred Gaudelli? That coming up. Coach Parcells will join us next. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go and check us out on Twitter at Horse Racing Show, and go to our Facebook page and like us. You can follow us there, as well as at thehorseracingshow.com. That's what it's called. I'm Kenny Rice, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice, and delighted to have this man as our first guest today. He is a 2-time winning Super Bowl coach with the New York Giants, a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and a horse racing fan and owner, Coach Bill Parcells. Coach, good to talk to you. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Ken. Good to be with you.
Now, I think people in the horse racing business certainly know. Maybe football fans don't know really your passion for horse racing, which I think began when you were a kid growing up in New Jersey.
That's correct. My father was a horse racing fan, and every once in a while he would take me to Monmouth Park, and we'd go see the races there, and that's kind of where my first experience was. But you know, when I was young, horse racing was very big in New York, and along with baseball and boxing, and very popular. And so I kind of grew up watching it, not really being involved, but I watched it with interest, and I've been in and out for a long time here now, and I enjoy it very much.
You're probably the only person that ever had, at his induction to the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, I believe you had 2 of your friends who happened to be horse trainers that you invited to come watch you.
Well, that's true. I'm longtime friends with Shug McGahee, and at that time Gary Siaka was training for me, and so they were both in attendance, and you know, I enjoyed having them there. They've been a big help to me, particularly Shug. He's been a long-time friend of mine, and you know, he's been a big assistance to me in kind of getting underway in this business.
Coach, you've had some horses. You had a horse in the Breeders' Cup this past year at Churchill Downs. You've been in some big races. Is there any comparison to being in a big football game and being in a big race as an owner?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know what it would be like for someone else. For me, I get the same adrenaline, you know, when they put that horse in the gate and your name's on it. It's just like when they kick the football off in a big game. And I think my problem is I need action, and I've had it all my life, and now my action is golf and horse racing.
Do you get nervous? Do you get as nervous in a horse race as you did when you were on the sideline in a football game?
Well, actually, the fact is I get more nervous at the horse race because in the football game, at least I had something that I could do to help control the outcome. In the horse race, I'm just at the mercy, and so I guess I'm a little more nervous at the horses.
You can't take the jockey out at the 3/8 pole and replace him, can you?
No, I'll stay with him. That's right. You know, it's and you know, you're always anxious from the beginning because you hope your horse breaks well. You hope he, you know, gets in good position. So you know, the entire race is intriguing because there's always something that you're thinking about as the race goes on, and of course, when they come down the stretch, that's very exciting.
And you have some horses still out on the track. I talked to you before the Breeders' Cup. We talked on the phone. I asked you about 40 Under. Remember, we were all doing research trying to find out the name. I thought it was some scheme that you had, a defensive play or something with the Giants, but it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. It was it was the price of the horse. We were under budget for a change, and so we named him 40 Under. But I have another horse called 50 Over. So I'm still down 10,000.
What is the thing that you enjoy most when you go to the races? And I've seen you at Saratoga. I know you used to live up in that area, and you go to the races. Is it just the people come up to you and talk about football, I'm sure, as well as the racing part of the whole thing?
Well, yeah, but, you know, I'm there because of the racing. I live in Saratoga Springs in the summer. I'm there for 5 months, and, you know, finally the horses get there, and, you know, I'm pretty much involved with them every day of the meet for sure. And, you know, even into the fall, because I'll go down to Belmont when they move down there, or, you know, if they're running, you know, somewhere else close, you know, I try to go. And so I just like it. You know, it's exciting for me. It keeps my mind occupied. It gives me something to do in the morning. There's always something of interest about the horses, you know, with the workouts and who's getting back to training and who's shaping up ready for the race. There's always things going on. So I have 11 of them currently. 4 of them are 2-year-olds that are just getting ready to get to the track. They're not there yet, but you know, another couple of months they'll be there. So I look forward to that. It's just like having rookie players. You know, you want to see what they can do.
Yeah, a good analogy there. And you, in both, in many ways, take so many months and years actually of preparation. With a 2-year-old, everybody's optimistic. Could we be thinking Super Bowl winning coach, Kentucky Derby winning owner coming up in 2020?
I don't know that. I wish I knew that.
I do too, Coach.
I certainly am aspiring to win a Grade 1 if I can. I haven't done that yet. I've won the biggest race in New York, and I've won some other stakes, but I haven't won that Grade 1 yet. So that's what I'm looking to do if I can.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. And I think I should have to ask this. Any idea about this Patriots-Rams matchup in the Super Bowl?
Well, football's a funny game. It can go a lot of different ways, and I would just have a hard time going against the Patriots because, they obviously have a very, very experienced quarterback and a very experienced coach. And that doesn't mean everything's going to go well, but I just think all in all, that experience helps you.
Listen, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your time, and we'll be rooting for you to get that Grade 1 victory this year, okay?
Okay, thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Coach Bill Parcells, for being with us. Very special guest and a great guy and a great ambassador for racing. And remember, like us and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Racing Show and like our Facebook page. We'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. We're glad to have with us today Dr. Steve Reed from the Rood and Riddle Hospitals. Of course, that's one of our sponsors, and Dr. Reed's specialty, internal medicine and neurology. And I want to ask you, Doc, thanks for being with us, first off.
Thank you for asking me. I love it.
And the first thing is, this is the cold and flu season for us humans. Everybody's saying, guard against the flu, guard against this. Is there a season for horses that you have to be particularly concerned with? Is it an ongoing 12-month thing?
Well, it depends. There are three pretty important neurologic problems, but one of them that's really a virus that this time of year is, right out there causing a big problem is the equine herpes virus. So there's no doubt that this time of year we are starting to see more and more horses shedding that virus. It's spread by respiratory route. So that's a big thing. Beyond that, the ones that are related to bony problems in the neck, usually we see them at a little around 6 to 12 months of age in that time frame as they're growing rapidly.
As far as what you do, you're talking about neurology. Is there particular things that you deal with the neurology of a horse?
Yeah, there are 3 or 4 probably really big problems that we see. One is a developmental problem where they develop a small vertebral canal, and that's usually related to how the bone is growing, how rapidly the horses are growing. So that's one where there's pinching of the spinal cord. Another one is a protozoal infection, and most people refer to that as EPM. And anytime a horse takes a bad step, they're often going to go on treatment for EPM, and there are some medications that can be used. The other one is degenerative diseases. We're starting to worry more and more about neurodegenerative diseases, and so people are looking at problems that affect both nerves, peripheral nerves, and the spinal cord. And then I mentioned the first one, the herpes.
Yeah, and like with the herpes, you mentioned that this is a viral, a respiratory thing, which people probably would not associate that with.
That's right. Well, the respiratory thing is the way it gets spread around, and once it's in the body,
so it's not like they're just having crazy sex, these horses.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Those maybe. Horses, they'll go nuts on you. But really, it is a serious thing. Obviously, you don't want to make light of it. It can be very
serious.
But again, because it's spread through the respiratory, it makes it why you hear about racetracks shutting down temporarily or barns closing for a while or whatever.
Exactly. The respiratory signs usually are pretty benign, a little bit of a fever, snotty nose, and maybe they cough, but not such a big deal. The 2 most critical things that virus can do, and the thing that we vaccinate them for most critically is, number 1, it can cause abortions. Mm-hmm. So we vaccinate against herpes to prevent abortions. And we also would like to know if our vaccines would prevent the neurologic form. And so far, none of them seem to be effective on that.
I want to get back to the degenerative issue you were talking about. Is that primarily among older horses that had a lot of racing? It's been on the track for a few years, or is it just simply horses getting older like humans get older?
Well, it's a unique situation. It's a neurodegenerative disease, so it's got some similarities to, the neurodegenerative diseases in people that we worry about. One is Lou Gehrig's, another Parkinson's, so they're really, really timely things that are really, really bad. Well, some of these degenerative processes occur in the spinal cord, others in peripheral nerves. The one that affects the nerves, the horses have a lot of muscle atrophy, so they look similar to an animal with Lou Gehrig's disease. The most interesting thing about those is they appear to be oxidant injuries. So the treatment is give them a lot of antioxidants, mostly vitamin E.
Really?
Yep.
Just like we should take.
That's right. We should take vitamin E.
I want to ask you about wobblers.
Wobblers. That's...
Because
You asked me
everywhere
about
I
one
go,
of my most favorite diseases.
people ask me two things. They say, who's going to win the Super Bowl and what about wobblers?
What about wobblers?
Everywhere I go.
No doubt about it, because Dr. Woody and I are working really hard to see if we can get a wobbler to win the Kentucky Derby, but so far we haven't had that luck. But wobblers are that developmental problem where they have a narrow spinal cord leading to pinching of the spinal cord in the neck. And usually if you have a horse and they're real young, what we'll try to do is, since it's developmental, we'll try to grow them at a very slow rate with the idea that maybe they'll be able to remodel their way out of the problem. If that doesn't work, then there is a surgery that can be done to correct the problem.
And that would be a story. That would be the Disney movie, wouldn't it?
The
A wobbler
Disney
goes
movie,
on
a
to win
wobbler
and you help it win the Kentucky Derby.
That would be the story,
Wow. You travel around a lot. You go to other veterinarian schools. I don't know if you're would it be fair to say you're like the vet inspector of the vets? I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but you talk to them, you observe them, you see what they're doing as well and offer advice. Is that correct?
Well, one of the volunteer jobs that I have is I serve on the American Veterinary Medical Association Council on Education. And the responsibility of that council is part of that is making certain that veterinarian colleges that are accredited, to maintain that accreditation, they have to adhere to certain rules and standards. There are 11 standards that they have to live up to. And so I just happen to be one of the members of that team that might go and look at other veterinary colleges.
And you're all over the place. You'll be in Wellington, Florida some. You're in Lexington, Kentucky some. I guess wherever Rood and Riddle has a clinic, you're probably there, Saratoga or wherever.
That's right. I get an opportunity to go to all three of those places.
How did you choose Rood and Riddle? How'd you wind up there?
Well, that's, I guess the opportunity to go to Rood and Riddle, it first came a number of years ago, and I was at Ohio State University on the faculty. And
the Ohio State University.
The Ohio State University. And I decided that I really wanted to stay there. But many of my colleagues, starting with Dr. Embertson, who trained part of his time at Ohio State, Dr. Bramlage, who also trained at Ohio State, Dr. Ruggles, who taught at Ohio State, all of those people ended up here. Dr. Woody, an airway surgeon, trained at Ohio State. So when I was looking to leave academics, the logical place for me to go was Rood and Riddle. In my opinion, if you took the veterinarians at Rood and Riddle Equine Hospital and you placed them at any veterinary college in the world, they would be, if not the leader, they would be right near the top as leaders in all areas of medicine and surgery and reproduction.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time. I never thought we'd talk about horse herpes and wobblers and actually enjoy it. But no, you were great in explaining it to people. It is serious. Don't want to make light of that, but I thank you for the candid explanation. I cannot let you go first without asking you a couple of things about our football show that we're on today. One, Ohio State playoffs not getting there.
What the devil happened?
What happened on that?
I have no idea. The one thing I still do, even though I live in Lexington, I have 6 tickets for every home football game at Ohio State. And I try to go to every home game and as many away games as I can. So I don't know how they didn't make the playoff.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that, to be honest. Now, second, It's just like when you come like Derby time. Come back around Derby time. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? Patriots or Rams?
Oh, man. Even though the quarterback for the Patriots is a Wolverine,
Yes, I know.
I'm a Patriots fan.
Yeah.
So I kind of have an idea that the Patriots are going to win.
All right. Dr. Steve Reed, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And we'll
My
be back
pleasure.
come back again. Come back again.
Can't wait.
He makes veterinarian science fun, as we try to do on this show. You're watching the Horse Racing Show. Be sure to subscribe and watch us on the YouTube channel. Go to @Horse Racing Show on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Wow, we're just social media giants now. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Remember to like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter @Horse Racing Show. Like us on Facebook. We're also available on Apple iTunes and Google Play. We said from the start of this last week, this is only our second show, that our hope is to get as good as it gets kind of guests on there, meaning that you can say, how good is this guy? As good as it gets. He's one of the best of what he does. And this being the Super Bowl edition of the Horse Racing Show, we've got a guy as good as it gets. Executive sports producer with NBC. He has produced not only Super Bowls, but also the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown, and I've had the pleasure to work with him on those Triple Crown series. Fred Gaudelli joins us. Fred, thanks for being on.
Kenny, great to be here, man.
Earlier, I compared the Derby to the Super Bowl only in this way. They're both sort of social animals, pun not intended there, as well as the fact that you've got a big sporting event, and you have these week-long build-ups for either a game or a horse race. You buy any of that?
I buy it all. Having had the great fortune of doing both, there are a lot of similarities. That build-up is really intense. A lot of anticipation, a lot of things flying around, a lot of parties, a lot of good times. I think it's a place where most Americans would like to get to, someday, either to the Super Bowl or the Kentucky Derby. I buy it hook, line, and sinker.
As far as when you're producing and you're going into a Super Bowl and you're going into a horse race, any similarities on the way you prepare for a 2-minute horse race and a 3-hour-plus football game?
The similarity would be you're trying to prepare for as much of the unknown and the unexpected as you possibly can. But football and horse racing really are, no pun intended here, two different animals. A football game, there's a lot of build-up, but then the game starts and it's 3 hours, or 3 hours plus, and you're, covering the action on the field. The Kentucky Derby, as you know better than I, and every year it seems like we make the pre-race longer. It's 3 hours of content that you're generating and are responsible for, and then it's all leading up, to this 2 minutes. And in a football game, you could have, a bad cut or a bad replay, and over the course of 3 hours, as long as it's not the critical plays of the game, no one's going to remember it. And those 2 minutes, you have to be perfect on the first Saturday in May, or everyone's going to remember. So the intensity and the pressure are similar, and you realize you're doing something that's, near and dear to, tens of millions of Americans, but the actual events themselves really couldn't be more different.
You've got a lot of space to cover in both places. Obviously, we know the size of a football field. I think people that watch a horse race, sometimes they see the track. They don't realize there's a lot of area, especially like at a Belmont or at a Churchill Downs. There's a lot of area and a lot of cameras needed from that barn area to get over to the track, to get over to the paddock.
Look, when I, was assigned the Kentucky Derby, I had watched, 25, 30 derbies in my life, but I never really had the sense of how big Churchill Downs is. And the planning, as you all know, because you're one of the reporters that's all over the map, literally, at Churchill Downs, just the planning of moving people and moving equipment over the course of 3 hours sometimes dictates what the content can and cannot be. and it's a great expanse. And the technical people at NBC really do a phenomenal job of making it as seamless as possible. But it's always in the front of your mind, hey, I want to do this, but can I do this? Because Kenny has to get from the paddock back to the betting window, and that's over a mile. Whereas in a football game, the cameras are set. You know where they are. The teams are within that 100 by 53-yard football field. And yes, you have some cameras that move and things of that nature, but it's nothing like the Derby in the sense that the physical footprint of the playing field or of the venue, really has to be accounted for in all of your planning.
Fred, how many cameras would you have at a Super Bowl, and how many would you have at a Derby, ballpark figure? Actually, you probably know exact, but I'm just curious. I know there's a lot.
They're probably pretty similar. I think the last Super Bowl we did, and if you're going to count in each pylon there's like 6 or 9 cameras. I count them as one. I mean,
Yeah.
But you probably have 40 cameras, and the Derby, probably isn't much different. Again, because of that, that great expanse that we talk about of how big, Churchill Down is. It's very similar. But when the race goes off, you probably only have, 10 or 12, 14, 15 cameras actually shooting the actual race, while there's, 35 cameras shooting every single play of that football game.
Talking with Fred Gaudelli of NBC Sports. He's produced Super Bowls. He's produced the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown. He's won over 20 Emmys. You probably won another Emmy while we're talking. I don't know. You might have won another one. That's really how good he is. And I love the preparation. Truly, working with you, I learned a whole lot, even after doing it all these years, about the preparation. I'm not sure. And, I guess that's why it's supposed to be, isn't it? The fan at home should be able to watch it, and it should look effortless. Like Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth and Michelle Tafoya just show up one day and start calling a game, or we show up and start talking about horses. But there's a lot of preparation that goes on weeks and hours, certainly leading up to it all.
Oh, I mean, you're right, Kenny. The person at home should not be able to feel or see the effort that it took to put on that event. And to me, and again, I mean, I've done a lot of football games. I've done 2 Triple Crowns in my life, and that's about it. But the preparation for horse racing, to me, far surpassed that of a football game. And again, I've done football for over 30 years, so it's kind of second nature. But it is extensive. But because of, the unpredictability of horse racing and all the things that can happen, and obviously the horses can't talk and tell us how they're feeling. And I remember, my first Derby, just talking to you and Tom Hammond and Mike Battaglia, and hey, like the morning line favorite scratches on race day sometime, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That was a real foreign concept to me. I'm like, are you serious? They go, yeah, it's happened like 3 of the last 5 years, and of course John Velasquez that year was supposed to ride Uncle Mo, and Uncle Mo scratched on Friday, and so to me the preparation for horse racing, people wouldn't get it. What are you talking about? It's it's a 2-minute race. There's 20 horses on the track. Like how intense can it be? It's intense. I was much more nervous for horse racing than I am for a football game, but enjoyed the Derby as much as I enjoyed doing the Super Bowl. I mean, it really is a signature event, in America.
One thing I'll never forget, and I believe you'll probably remember this, I was getting in a golf cart outside of the trailer where all the announcers stayed during the week of a Triple Crown race, and it was Belmont Stakes pre-day, the day before the Belmont Stakes on a Friday, and I was getting in the golf cart to go over and check on I'll Have Another, and I'm not sure. I think we were going to tape an interview maybe for one of the NBC Sports Network shows on that Friday with Doug O'Neill, and you came out of the trailer and said, come back in here right now, and I knew something. I'll never forget that.
And that's just a perfect example, and, so it's 10 a.m., it's Friday. I'll Have Another is one of the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown. I get a call from someone close to the O'Neill camp who I really trust, and the person says to me, don't go anywhere with this, but we're going to scratch I'll Have Another here in the next hour. And obviously, we had built the entire show. We had a show on Friday on NBCSN, then had the big show Saturday on NBC, and the whole show was built around a horse going for the Triple Crown. I think it was the first one maybe since Smarty Jones. I can't really remember. But and then all of a sudden, those shows are now gone. They are dead. And now you have to figure out, 2 new shows. And, the teams show up for the Super Bowl. Maybe a quarterback could get sick the night before the game, but he'd probably still play. But you don't have those kind of developments in major sporting events, in America. It rarely ever happens. I mean, I remember I did a Super Bowl where Barrett Robbins, who was the Oakland Raiders center at that time, disappeared the day before the game, went to Tijuana, went on a drinking binge and, couldn't play in the game. But he's 1 out of 53. He's not 1 out of 1. And we didn't build an entire show, around the center for the Oakland Raiders for Super Bowl 37. So, yeah, I mean, that I'll have another experience. That is one I will never forget because, we had shot all those pieces, Steve Coffin, everything about the Triple Crown, and now there isn't a Triple Crown. I mean, we're now having a regular Belmont Stakes, but of course the big story is the horse is scratched, and Rob Hyland, who does a phenomenal job of producing the Triple Crown for NBC Sports, he and I think, left Belmont at about 4 a.m. Saturday morning, and then we're back at like 7 a.m., to get the Saturday show rolling. So, yeah, that was a memory I've tried to forget. Thanks for bringing it back up.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. I'll never work again, will I? That's the one I should have left hanging. I just remember you.
Yeah,
I remember
that was a tough one, man.
I remember coming to the trailer a little later than that, but not much, maybe 8:15 or something. You and Rob, I was amazed you guys were still functioning because I knew you'd be up all night. And I remember I was actually, and you probably remember too, my assignment was Doug O'Neill Patrol. Everything I was going to do on that day was Doug O'Neill, and I'll have another, and Paul Redham and the whole connections. And I remember just scampering, which was nothing like you guys did, staying up all night and editing and putting it all together. That was amazing. That's why I really, I wish people sometimes, I know we talked about it's nice for them to see how effortless it is. I just wish they could get a glimpse of guys staying up all night re-editing stories.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you really earn your money, something like that, when something like that happens. But that's what makes horse racing unique. You just don't know, what's going to happen. I mean, like we've seen it a million times, horse doesn't want to go in the gate, horses rank in the walkover. I mean, all these things that you don't really deal with. Look, I remember I did a college football game, back in the early 90s, Miami and Florida State, and the Miami team wouldn't let Florida State's, horse and mascot onto the field, and a big fight broke out. And you've had things like that happen, but they still play the game. You know what I mean? It's not like the game doesn't get played. So, yeah, horse racing is a challenge, and you and the entire NBC Sports team that I'm not a part of any longer in terms of the Triple Crown, really just do a phenomenal job of making it a great event for, all us TV viewers to watch.
One thing I wish horse racing would do, and I know this is a preaching to the choir thing, I think you feel that way, and everybody at NBC, and everybody's probably doing a horse race out there feels this way. I wish they would accept a few more 21st century things, like maybe some small camera on jockeys, a few things like that I believe would help horse racing for those casual fans out there. And maybe even those guys that are hard bettors that don't quite realize how fast they're going and how close those jockeys are, because I think that would add to the excitement of horse racing that maybe people don't get a feel of even if you go to the track.
Yeah, I think that would help, but I think the thing that would really help, again, and I'm just going to go back to my youth, so like the first horse that really I remember is Secretariat, and I was 12 years old when Secretariat won the Triple Crown. But Secretariat raced, after he won the Triple Crown. I think he raced another year, if I'm not mistaken. And the fact that, these great horses like American Pharaoh and Justified, the fact that they never race again, you don't have that sustained star, that you have in other sports. Because when you look at what it costs to go to sporting events, and I know when you go to a beautiful place like Keeneland or Saratoga or, Churchill Downs, it's such an affordable place to take your kids. And I don't know too many kids who don't love horses. They all think they're beautiful as they are. I think it could be marketed so much better, but I think you would need some of these, these star horses to stay around and race a couple of more years. And I know that was the way it was back in the 20th century, the early part of the 20th century, where horses would run for 4 or 5 years. And I get the investment now and the fact that you want that return on your investment. But I think that would be the biggest thing that could really help, because a day at the races at the right track is a great day. And you don't even have to bet. You don't have to gamble. The jockeys, the trainers, they're all pretty accessible, I think. Maybe not to the general public, but it could be made that way if you wanted it to be that way. And to me, it's the best bargain in sports. I know, having been assigned the Triple Crown, it was something that my daughter, probably never would have been exposed to if I wasn't exposed to. And we come to the Derby every year, and like you, we're in the same syndicate, with a couple of horses, and it's something that I never anticipated that I would really fall in love with, but it's also created a great bond, between my daughter and I. And I love horse racing, and I think, if there could ever be a central governing body and the right marketer, you could appeal to the mass public again.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. It would be like if Goodell had no control over the AFC, but he had the NFC almost. That, for those that are casual, that's the way horse racing is. You can make your statement, the NTRA or whoever wants to make their statement, but Kentucky's going to do what they do, and Arkansas and New York and California, they can still do different things. And you're right, it is confusing if you're not around the game.
Right. And, you would need, there would have to be, look, there's a lot of owners, I feel like, in the sport of horse racing that get that principle, that see the potential if there could be a unified body and everybody on the same page, because it's not cheap going to sporting events any longer. I don't care what the event is. If you're talking about professional sports, it's a commitment financially. And to me, horse racing is one of the great bargains of all time. And at the right track, on a beautiful day, it's a great experience. It's a lot of fun. I think again, if it had the central leadership and the right leader, I think it could really come back in a big way, the way it was in the early part of the 20th century.
I like the fact, one of the favorite things is the way you tell stories. And I learned a lot about that, not just the horse racing, but watching a football game. For example, Rex Burkhead, I don't know him personally, but his father played at Eastern Kentucky University. And
Right.
Rex was born here in Lexington. So there's actually people around here that have Patriots rooting interest that not normally would, only because of Rick Burkhead, the father, and they know him from playing here in Central Kentucky in high school and then going on to play at EKU. And I think those kind of stories in horse racing or anywhere else, the stories will grab people. Even if you're a diehard fan, I don't think you miss out on hearing a little bit more about a person.
Oh, without a doubt. And there isn't another sport that has richer stories than the sport of horse racing, from the owners to the trainers to the jockeys to the people that work at the various tracks. I mean, that's why you can do a 4-hour pregame show, to the Kentucky Derby, or a 3-hour pregame show to a Belmont Stakes for the Triple Crown, because the stories are endless, and they're really good stories, and they cover all, both genders, all facets of life, comebacks, all the things that, people, love to hear about and learn about. And in my experience, look, I've done football for a long time. The stories in horse racing are unparalleled. I mean, they're amazing.
Am I correct on this? It's like the Super Bowl and the Kentucky Derby, from a demographic standpoint, almost a 50-50 split in gender. You got the male and female audience. more than you would probably any other sporting event, or at least in the ballpark similar?
Yeah, I think you're pretty accurate on that. I mean, obviously the Super Bowl is the most watched television show every year. The Kentucky Derby is generally the most watched show of, from after the Super Bowl. It's usually the most watched show up until football season starts again. So, it kind of pass time. It's kind of a time marker. Okay, it's May, the Derby. America just kind of gets ready for it and waits for it, and you don't have. And the great thing about it, like the Super Bowl, you don't have to be a sports fan. I mean, it's an event unto itself. It's a very social event. There's the wardrobe angle of it, there's the drinking of it, obviously the betting of it, and it's just a great day. If people ever have an opportunity, I tell all my friends, and I tell them this: if your choice is the Super Bowl or the Kentucky Derby, and your team isn't in the Super Bowl, so if you're a Packer fan and the game is, the Rams and the Patriots this year, and you had a choice, I say go to the Derby, because to me the Derby it's just an amazing event.
Wow. Do you have a favorite Super Bowl of the games that you've produced? Does one stand out that is kind of a favorite?
I would say that the first one I did it, and I've done 6, and the first one we did at NBC was the Arizona Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in that game, you had James Harrison's 100-yard interception return to end the first half, which was unbelievable. You had Larry Fitzgerald's prolific fourth quarter, where the Cardinals got the lead back and he kind of took over the game. And then you had Santonio Holmes' catch in the final minute of play, right tiptoeing on the sideline there in the far corner of Raymond James Stadium. So that one to me stood out for how great a game it was and just the plays that people will never forget.
Another thing about the Derby, stretching a little bit here to compare it to the Super Bowl, fans will ask you who's going to win the game. It could be a regular season game. It could be the third race at Remington Park. Who do you think is going to win? But more so, I think, with the parties and pools that people will put together, Super Bowl, and they'll even have Derby parties. But with the Super Bowl, having you on, I got to ask, you got to pick in the Super Bowl, or how do you think it's going to play out, Fred?
Well, I always have a hard time picking against New England just because of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And but having said that, if Kansas City would have won the coin toss a couple of weeks back, they might be in this game right now, because I thought whoever had the ball last was probably going to win that game. And we may see the same thing on Sunday. I'm really curious to how healthy Todd Gurley is. Mm-hmm. He didn't appear to be too healthy in that championship game down in New Orleans. I think if he's healthy and ready to go, it definitely gives a boost for the Rams. And I know C.J. Anderson's been, really good filling in, but Todd Gurley is a singular talent, and he's a tough guy to defend, and he's big. So I think that's going to play a big part of it. But, again, I always have a difficult time picking against Belichick and Brady. And I did 2 Rams games this year, and I think the Rams only lost 4 games, and I did 2 of the games they lost, Chicago and Philadelphia. So I saw a formula on consecutive weeks, and we had the games on consecutive weeks that could beat them. I'm sure Belichick has studied that upside down. So if I had to pick, if you're asking for my pick, I pick the Patriots. In a close one.
Yeah. It almost seems, I don't want to get into this fate thing, I kind of felt the same way when Jerome Bettis was playing with the Steelers and everything seemed to fall for the Steelers. I mean, Ford, how many times is he ever going to line up offside? That Tom Brady gets basically another play, and
I know.
It almost seems like there's a fate.
For 10 seconds, Kansas City was in Atlanta.
Yeah, it almost seems, and I hate to use this, it's used too much, it sounds cliche, but it almost looks like a fate thing, like everything's smiling on Brady once again in the Patriots. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I will say this: every Super Bowl they've been in, win or lose, has been tight, and it's usually going right down to the end. And I don't expect this one will be any different.
Fred, it's great to catch up with you. I loved working with you, and you're as good as it gets, and I really mean that. And I guess I will see you next at the Kentucky Derby.
You will definitely see me there. I made my plans yesterday, so I will be there, Kenny, and it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and good luck with the podcast.
All right. Thank you for being on with us. I really appreciate it. We'll catch up again. Thank you.
Anytime.
Fred Gaudelli, NBC executive sports producer. He's as good as it gets. Like I say, multiple Emmy wins. And he is our guest here, as we'll have more coming up here. You're listening to or watching, if you have the video cast of the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. Welcome back as we get ready to wrap up the Horse Racing Show for this week. And don't forget to subscribe and like us on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Horse Racing Show, and you can like us on Facebook, and we're happy as well that we're on Apple, iTunes, and Google Play. And we thank you for responding already. Remember, follow us on at Horse Racing Show on Twitter and send us your questions or your observations if you'd like, and we'll try to get them on as much as we can. Our first one comes from Nice Dice 231. Did the Eclipse Awards voters get it right with Justify as Horse of the Year? Eclipse Award, only he got the gold statue. Yeah, they got it right. As good as Accelerate is, and it has nothing to do with the third place finish that he had last weekend in the Pegasus, nothing to do with that. It's what he did last year. He was tremendous. Older Horse of the Year, as we predicted, as everybody would predict. Monomoy Girl, Best Filly, as everybody would have predicted, and they won their awards. They were the other two nominated for Horse of the Year. But when you look at what Justify did in 111 days to go undefeated and win a Triple Crown, it's never been done, never in centuries of horse racing. Justify did something that was absolutely amazing. And when you look down the road, you're going to remember Justify more than any other horse that ran in 2018. That's how special he was. He was indeed the Horse of the Year. The voters got it right. But as Fred Gaudelli mentioned earlier, one of the things about horse racing, and it's because there's just too much money to be made in breeding. No one's going to keep a horse on the track to try again at 4 years old, much less think about 5 or something, because there's just too much money to be made in breeding. And when $70 million was put on the table for those that owned Justify, it was a no-brainer. He would never race again. Some people might have thought that that was not sportsmanlike, but let's face it, even to rich people, $70 million is a lot of money, and that's business. And never forget that horse racing is a business as much as it is a sport. Thanks again for watching this week. Thank you, Nice Dice 231. We hope to hear more from you on Twitter, and we'll talk about that next week. Thanks to our guest today. What a super show it was. The coach, two-time Super Bowl champ Bill Parcells, being with us. Fred Gaudelli from NBC Sports, who has produced Super Bowls as well as Kentucky Derbies and the Triple Crown. And thanks to Dr. Steve Reed from Rood and Riddle Hospitals. We'll talk to you again next week here on the Horse Racing Show. Until then, I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for watching, everyone, and goodbye.
Wow.